So when I told my husband that I was working on a tank top episode, he very sarcastically said, well, good thing you're doing this during tank top season. Listen, yes, tank tops are great for beating the heat in the summer, but they're also great if you're tall and you need to layer them under t-shirts because t-shirts are too short, and they're great for layering in the winter just to give you a little bit of extra warmth. Every season is tank top season. Let's get into it. Hey, I'm Stephanie Rubletz. Welcome back to my channel if you've been here before, and if you haven't been here before, I am on a one-year mission to completely reform, reface, remake my entire wardrobe before I turn 40 in January. So, as I mentioned, today we are working on tank tops, and I already have like my perfect tank top. It fits me great. I had to order it so that it would come in a long length, but all my tank tops are just, they've had their day. They're getting a little old, they're way stretched out, they're threadbare, they need to be replaced. So because I already have my perfect tank top, I'm going to clone it and use it as my pattern for all my new tank tops. So without further ado, let's do it. All right, so here is my old tank top, and it's quite stretched out and the shape is sort of a little distorted. So I need to keep that in mind when I'm making my pattern. Now I'm going to fold it so that my side seams are matched up, and I'm going to put a few pins in there just to hold the side seams together because I'm going to have to move it a few times, and then I'm just not going to have to fiddle with it every time I move it. Next, I'm going to lay my tank top on top of some tracing paper. Now the way it works is because my straps are meant to go around my shoulders, if I try and pull my straps straight in order to trace them, it's going to pull up on the bottom of the garment. So I may have to trace out the bottom of the garment and then pull up on the straps and trace them after I'm done doing the bottom of the garment. That way, if it distorts it, I don't wreck any of my lines. All right, so I've spread out my tank top as flat and as straight as I can get it. Now, I am tracing that bottom edge, but I'm gonna go back and true it up with a ruler later. Really, the important thing is to mark where your seams are and your edges are, and you can always just go back and fill that in with a straight edge. My neckline and my arm line, I'm going to fully trace, and then I'll go back later and make it pretty. Then I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to mark out all the lines between where I had marked my corners and my seams. I've also put a line on there to remind myself that I will be cutting this on the fold line. Then I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to fill in the lines between all of the corner markings and the seam markings. I also have to give myself a hem. So I'm going to give myself an extra inch at the bottom of the shirt, and I'm going to give myself some seam allowance on the side, and I've done a 1/2 inch seam allowance there. And then I also give that seam allowance at the top of the strap. And there we go, we have half of our pattern done. I'm going to repeat that procedure on the back of the shirt now to get my back pattern piece. So here we are, I have my 2 pattern pieces, and I've actually batch cut. So I've layered my fabric and cut 2 of each because I'm going to make 2 tank tops. And because I batch cut, that's why I have my fabric pinned together on the folded edge. If you want to see more on my batch sewing technique, I'll link it above and in the description. All right, so I need to do a little bit of math here so that I can figure out how long I want to make my band. And I'm going to copy the style of banding that was on the t-shirt, which looked to be like a double fold bias tape, but I'm going to do it a little differently. First thing I need to do is I need to measure my openings. And what I'm looking for here is I want to create bands that are 90% of the length of the opening. So I need my bands to be 10% shorter. That's just to help give them a little bit of stretch so that they lay down nicely. So all I'm doing is I'm taking my length and I'm multiplying it by 0.90, and that will give me the length that my band needs to be. And I just rounded it to like the nearest 1/4 inch basically. Now, depending on what kind of fabric you have, you might find that you need an 80%, like if your fabric is super stretchy. I tried an 80% band on this fabric and it just seemed to be too tight, so I went with 90%. Now that I've cut a 2-inch band and then pressed them in half to giving me a 1-inch wide folded bias tape, I've marked the center of my neck opening, and I'm also going to mark the center of my neck bias tape, just so I can match them up. Now I'm going to anchor the banding in the center as well as on the ends. Once anchored, I can stretch my banding out just slightly and pin it all the way around the neckline. Placing this banding raw edges together on the right side of the fabric. Now I'm going to go ahead and stitch that out. All right, you can see here I have my bands on my arms and my neck all stitched on, and my raw edges are all together. Now I'm going to fold my banding around those raw edges and pin it. You could totally do a double fold bias tape here if you would prefer. I just find that it's a lot of raw edges to keep track of when you're running it through your sewing machine. And this fabric just happened to be really, really thin, and so to mimic the style of banding that was on my other tank top, this worked really well. As I'm pinning the top edge of that band on, I'm making sure that it's surpassing the other side a little bit so that I can make sure my needle's going to catch it. And I'm going to sew that with a double needle. And here we go. Both sides are very nicely finished. Now I'm going to take both sides of my tank top and stitch them together. So I need to pin my straps, and I will also pin down the sides of the garment. Once those are all stitched, I'm going to press back the raw edges on the straps, and I will stitch those down. And my very last step is I need a hem. So I'm setting a depth of 1 inch on my guide there. Now I'm going to run a row of stitching all the way around, and once again I'm going to use my double needle. So for me, this is definitely a layering tank because it is a semi-sheer fabric, and for me that's just perfect. It'll be comfy to wear to bed, it'll be comfy if I'm layering it under a too short t-shirt. Sorry, there's just a really cute dog that just walked by. Okay, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Join me again next week where we're gonna take that same pattern that we made and turn it into a supportive tank. So a tank that sort of has like a built-in bralette, sort of, and have it all be one piece. So until then, do all the things, like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next week.